Hi, I'm Scott Gallagher. Today, along with John Weber and Barry Fisher, I'm going to show you how to properly install a Furnane floor. Furnane floor construction consists of an epoxy setting bed which adheres a masonry unit to a concrete substrate. The vertical joints of the masonry units are filled with a chemical-resistant mortar or grout. There are two methods of installing a Furnane floor. The tile set method incorporates setting a tile in the Red Furnane bed, leaving about a 1/4 inch space between the tile. After approximately 24 hours, when the Red Furnane has taken an initial set, a chemical-resistant grout is floated into the joints. The bricklayer's method consists of buttering two sides of the brick and setting in the Red Furnane bed and basically shoving into place. What you end up with is a nominal 1/8 inch wide joint. Typically, the condition of the concrete substrate is suitable that a strong broom cleaning is all that's required before the Red Furnane setting bed is installed. However, depending on the specification and if there are presence of a lot of surface latents, greases, oils, other contaminants, abrasive grit blasting may be required. Barry Fisher will show us how to run a blast track machine. The best way to be sure that the Furnane installation can begin is to perform a mat test on the concrete. John, can you explain the test?
Yes, 16 hours ago, this 3x3 piece of polyethylene was taped down with duct tape to seal all the edges. And as you'll notice now, when I remove this piece of film, this concrete remains the same color as the surrounding area. So you obviously can start your Furnane system at this point. This slab is too wet and requires more time to dry.
The finished Furnane floor will follow the imperfections in the concrete substrate. It's important to check for high and low spots and for proper drainage. This can be accomplished using a long straight edge. Low spots in the concrete can be filled with res-clad A3000. John and Barry will demonstrate the installation.
Prior to the actual installation of the A3000, it is important to pre-wet the concrete slab with a little bit of water and scrub it into the surface. After the concrete's been pre-wetted with water, a slurry mix of the res-clad A3000 liquid and the A3000 powder is blended to form a very soupy material. That material is then scrubbed into the surface using the same scrubbing pad that we use for the water. Now, after the slurry material is rubbed into the surface, the res-clad A3000 is then applied to that surface using a straight edge or a steel trowel.
It's very important for the final appearance of the floor that the surface of the tile be waxed. Most mortars and grouts can stain the surface of the tile. The masonry units that most contractors will use are available waxed from the manufacturer. However, if that's not possible, Atlas can supply a unit to help the contractor do the waxing himself, and John will instruct on the proper technique.
The proper technique of waxing units, whether they're tile or brick, is to start in the center and pull the unit towards you, followed by placing the unit down again and pushing forward. And the reason for that is to minimize the amount of wax contamination you get on the sides of your unit. If you were to take this unit and force it in and force it this way and pull it forward, you get a tremendous amount of wax on this leading surface. I'll wax one more. And I also like to mention that when you stack these units, always stack them groove to groove and, give me that, I'm sorry, wax to wax. This will prevent any wax contamination on the back of the grooves if you were to stack them this way. For vertical fiber, brick or rough brick, you always want to give it a two-coat application, following the same procedure, drawing it back, pushing it forward, leaving it just set momentarily, giving it a second coat. Now, for cove base or inside corners, the only way to do this is with a brush and some hot wax. And again, it's very important to keep the wax off the bondable surfaces. And there's your wax unit.
After the installation is complete and the mortar grout has had a chance to set, this thin paraffin wax would be steam cleaned off. Some customers and specifications require back buttering. What this involves is filling the grooves of the masonry units with Red Furnane before setting them in a Red Furnane bed.
Some contractors will construct a two-sided jig or form. The reason for this is to prevent the tile or brick from sliding when the Red Furnane is applied. The procedure for that is you take your mixed Red Furnane and you put a small amount on top of your brick or pavers, which are now set upside down. Taking a plasterer's trowel, you fill in the grooves in the back of the tile.
Once the grooves are filled, the masonry unit is set in a previously spread fresh bed of Red Furnane. The Red Furnane setting bed is installed the same way for both the bricklayers and tilesetters method. Red Furnane is a three-component system: a resin, hardener, and powder. When working with three-component products, best results are obtained when the resin and hardener are blended in the mixer before adding the powder. The amount of powder put into the Red Furnane mix can be adjusted slightly, but we recommend that the powder ratio not vary in excess of 5%. Mechanical mixing is recommended in order to get proper wetting out of the powder into the resin hardener mix. When installing the Furnane floor by the tilesetter's method, it's important to measure out 4 courses of tile, mark the line, and snap it with a blue chalk line. This chalk line will act as a guide to spread the Red Furnane and set the tile about 1/4 inch apart. Freshly mixed Red Furnane is laid on the floor and spread with a 3/16 inch notch trowel. The working life of Red Furnane at 77 degrees Fahrenheit is approximately 45 minutes. It's important to not spread more Red Furnane than can be covered with tile within 30 minutes. It is critical for a successful installation that a continuous coat of Red Furnane be placed on the concrete substrate. For best results, the notch trowel should be held at a 45-degree angle. The wax tile are set into the freshly spread Red Furnane, leaving about a 1/4 inch space between the tile. John is placing a 3/8 inch ethafoam rod in the joint in front of the cove base. This rod will later be removed and filled with an expansion joint sealant. Black Furnane grout is too fluid to be used in the vertical joints of the cove base. It's therefore necessary to use carbo-alcore mortar. Like Black Furnane, carbo-alcore is a two-component material and mixed very similarly. The only difference in the material is that carboalcohol is a mortar and is a much thicker consistency. The carboalcohol mortar is pointed into the vertical and top joint of the cove base. You must take the proper precautions to ensure material does not get into the drains. An ethafoam rod will also be placed around the perimeter of the drain. This will also be removed and filled with an expansion joint sealant after the grout is set. Black Furnane grout is a two-component material. The resin is first added to the 5-gallon mechanical mixer. The powder is then added. Atlas recommends mechanical mixing because hand drills can entrain air into the grout, resulting in air bubbles in the grouted floor. The Black Furnane grout is poured onto the surface of the tile and floated into the joints with a hard-faced rubber trowel. When working with tile or pavers greater than 3/4 of an inch in thickness, it is recommended that a dual-pass system be used. The double-pass grouting method is recommended to ensure a full joint and minimize air bubbles that may appear in the grout. On the first pass, the grout should be left approximately 1/4 of an inch below the surface of the tile. Within 2 to 4 hours, the second pass should ensure a full joint. Any air bubbles seen in the joints of the tile should be broken and filled in immediately. On the final pass, the trowel should be held at a right angle to the tile surface and pulled diagonally across the joints. This diagonal movement will prevent the grout from being pulled out of the joints. It's important to remove as much grout as possible from the surface of the tile in order to facilitate steam cleaning. After the grout has set for 24 hours, the floor can be steamed using a portable steam jenny or in-plant steam. The paraffin wax coating has a melt point between 105 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit. You should steam clean with a minimum pressure of 60 pounds at the nozzle. Keep in mind that all drains should be blocked so that the wax does not get inside the drain. Mixing and installation of the Red Furnane setting bed is the same for both the bricklayers and tilesetters method. When installing the cove base, Red Furnane is spread uniformly on the wall and at the floor intersect. The cove piece is buttered with mortar and shoved into place. Excess mortar is struck from the surface of the cove piece. The cove pieces are blocked to keep them from swimming away from the wall. The mixing and application of the Red Furnane setting bed is identical to that of the tilesetter's method. In the bricklayer's method, a mortar is buttered onto two sides of the brick. This brick is then set in the Red Furnane bed and shoved into place. The excess mortar is struck from the surface of the brick. A spacer strip is placed over the control joint in the concrete. This strip will later be removed and filled with an expansion joint sealant. When laying out the floor, it's important to consider the placement of expansion joints. Typically, you would place expansion joints around the perimeter of the room, around columns, piers, or any protrusion through the concrete. John's going to lead us through the typical construction of an expansion joint.
Prior to the installation of the actual expansion joint material, a bound breaker material is placed in the joint first. In this case, we're using a 3/8 inch round ethafoam rod for that purpose. In some cases, where it depends on the thickness of your tile or your brick, you require 2 and possibly even 3 layers of this material to get your bond breaker performance.
John, what's the rule of the depth of an expansion joint versus the width?
The depth of the expansion joint should never be more than equal to the width of the expansion joint. Again, prior to the application of the expansion joint, some contractors tape the brick on either side of the expansion joint, which gives you a little neater surface. It's also important to remember that all the expansion joints should be installed prior to this wax coating being steamed off. Some expansion joints require a primer. This elastic 20 material is one of them that does. I will show you the installation of the primer. It's just simply a single component, very low in viscosity material that is brushed into the open joints.
The components of the expansion joint sealant are pre-blended in the original container. We recommend blending the contents again in a clean container before pouring into the caulking tube. The joint is caulked slightly to excess and then smoothed with a steel margin trowel. When work is complete at the end of the day, it's important to block the brick to keep them from swimming. As additional courses of brick are laid, it's important to remove excess mortar and point the joints as necessary. After the floor installation is complete, the floor is left undisturbed for a period of approximately 24 hours at 77 degrees Fahrenheit. At that time, the floor can be steam cleaned. The success of the Furnane floor system is dependent on the proper selection of the Atlas mortar grout, the Tyler paver, and sound installation practices. Since patented in 1951, the Furnane floor system has evolved to become the premier corrosion-resistant flooring system.